Hey homies, it's Plamond on Comics, and as promised, today I'm going to talk about the 3 circumstances that I feel it is appropriate to adopt. The reason why I say appropriate to adopt versus a great reason to adopt is because I don't necessarily condone the adoption system as it is. I believe it's corrupt, I believe it's based on exploitation, and that it takes advantage of the disadvantaged. That said, I do understand that there are children that need homes, and we get what we get, and hopefully we can change that over time. And I would love to make a video about the reformation of adoption and what I think we could do to make it better. But for this video, I'm just going to talk about the circumstances that I feel are the morally good reasons to adopt. And before I get into that, I also just want to say, of course, these are my opinions. I'm just one person, and there may be adoptees themselves that disagree with me, and that's okay. But I hope that you can look at it with an open mind and maybe get some insight from it. With that said, let's go into it. I'm going to start from the most ideal to the least ideal, okay? So, number one, the most ideal adoption, in my opinion, is when an adoption occurs within the family, meaning a relative of some sort adopts the child, whether that be an auntie and uncle or a grandparent or a cousin, that the child is able to stay within that family unit. And there's a couple reasons why I think that's important. First and foremost, hopefully, if the child is adopted in the biological family, that means that they will be able to maintain some sort of relationship with their biological parents. That would be ideal because children naturally have a desire to know and have a relationship with their parents. And it also would help, I believe, in the long run, the parents psychologically to be able to see that their child is growing up safe and that they are still a part of the family, although they may not be in a good place at the moment to see that. I know that a lot of birth parents do regret relinquishing that opportunity later down the line. Another reason why I think this is really the best case scenario is because this allows the child to grow up in an environment where they were made to fit. And the reason I say this is because we know that children are actually not born as blank slates like we once believed. We believed that it's just a white piece of paper and draw whatever you want on it. But we now know, no, there's a whole freaking novel written already on that baby when they're born, such as generational trauma, mental illnesses and mental health problems, genetic illnesses, physical ailments, even personality traits and tendencies. Tendencies for addiction, tendencies for a certain kind of personality. These sorts of things are already programmed into the baby before they're even born. And that is passed on through generation through generation through generation. So the family unit that they biologically belong to is the most suited unit for them to be in. It just makes sense. To go into that further, because I know that's quite an abstract idea, let me talk about my personal experience. I was adopted by what I would best describe as strangers to my biological family. They had no idea who they were before I was adopted. And I was adopted through an agency. They didn't just like toss me off into a dumpster or something. I have a very distinct personality. I'm loud. I'm very passionate. I'm very straightforward. I am very hyper and sporadic, and I definitely did not fit into my adopted family at all. My adopted family is very passive aggressive, and they did not see the world the way that I saw it, and they did not understand me very well. I grew up feeling very alienated, and I grew up masking my personality and adapting the way that I spoke to try to fit into that family, and it just was not good for my psyche. And it wasn't until I began to have a more established relationship with my biological family that I realized that there wasn't anything necessarily wrong with me. I just was different than my adopted family. When I met my biological family, well, I knew them from the time I was little, but when I started to establish a real relationship with them as a teenager, I realized that my biological family is very loud. They're very direct and to the point. They just say it as it is. They are very passionate people. And the way that I communicate aligns almost perfectly with the way that they communicate. It showed to me that nature versus nurture, in my case, nature definitely won out. I could not be programmed to have a similar personality as my adoptive family. I just was never going to fit that way. And my adoptive family to this day don't really understand the way that I am. And it's much more exhausting to converse with them than it is my adopted family. And it's just an extra difficulty. That's one of the reasons. And another thing that's a little bit easier to understand, because I feel like that's quite a vague example. Another reason is I've got in my biological family ADHD. My adopted family do not have ADHD in their family. I don't know of any family members within that family that have ADHD. So there's no experience with it. So growing up, I felt incredibly stupid, lazy. I just felt there was something extremely wrong with me. I didn't understand the way that my parents were trying to communicate with me, and it was just a mess, quite frankly. Conversely, my biological mother found out she had ADHD as an adult, and then her children, not all of them have ADHD themselves, her children that she raised were able to grow up in an environment where they were able to be nurtured and were able to get resources to help them with this disorder. That would have been something that I would have greatly benefited from, because it was one of the worst parts of growing up, honestly, was being undiagnosed and coping on my own with this disorder. Those are the main reasons why I believe that a biological family member is the best suited to adopt a child that's not able to be raised by their birth parents. Now, the second scenario is like second best option would be not biologically related to the child, but an open adoption with open communication, almost like a co-parenting sort of thing with the birth parents. And I know this sounds kind of radical for some people, but I really think this would be an amazing setup if we could finesse this more often. And it does happen, it's just not as formal, and it doesn't happen as often. But this is actually what kind of happened with me. I was adopted to strangers, but I had an open adoption, and most people don't understand, but open adoption usually just means that at 18 that can be unsealed and you can learn the identity of your parents, and then you can get, like, maybe your birth parents will get letters a couple times a year and some pictures of you, and that's basically it. That's like a very common open adoption, and people don't realize that. But in my case, my open adoption meant that my birth parents actually came and visited me several times throughout my childhood. When I was younger, I would see them maybe once every couple of years, but I talked to them on my birthday and Christmas, like on the phone, and that was kind of it. And then when I became a teenager, I would visit them in the summertime when I was out of school, and I would stay with them for like a week, which is very radical, and I understand that's not always possible, but some sort of relationship with the biological parents would be amazing. I, honest to God, 100% believe that the reason why I am alive today is because I was able to have a relationship with my biological family. I was incredibly depressed, and I did not have a great childhood. Not here for pity points. I'm not saying this to like, ooh, boo hoo. This is just a fact. My big lifeline was knowing that there were people that loved me and cared about me and that looked like me, and that I had this family that I did kind of fit into. It gave me comfort to know that in my circumstance that I was in at the moment wasn't ideal, but there was hope. Maybe in the future I could be in a better circumstance. And I think that it's also very beneficial for the biological parents to, in some capacity, see and be able to be involved in the growth of their child. Because also kind of a radical idea, but I don't believe that you just usurp the parentage of a child by adopting them. They're always going to be the child of someone else. You can share that parentage, but you can't eradicate it. So in my opinion, I wish that we had a more valuable sort of adoption system where the adoptive parent involves the birth parent more often. That would involve very selfless and very emotionally intelligent adoptive parents, and unfortunately we don't see that very much. But it would be great. Ideal. Second ideal, in my opinion. The third option, least favorable but still acceptable to me, is to have a stranger adoption where there is it's an open adoption, but the parents are not willing or able to be in the child's life. The open aspect of it just means that they have records available to them. To me, it is absolutely barbaric to have a closed adoption. What if the child has a history of cancer in their biological family or mental illness? They're just supposed to go through life not knowing when everybody else has the right to know. That's just bullshit. So I really think that if you are going to adopt, the parents don't want anything to do, the birth parents don't want anything to do with the child, there's no family available to take the child in, then at the very least make sure you're adopting open and that you ensure that your child has some kind of semblance of what their birth family is like, even if it's just your mom had brown eyes. That means so much to an adopted kid. And then also, of course, when they get older, they're going to want to know about their medical records as well. And they have the right to, just like everyone else. Lastly, let me just go over the characteristics that I feel are imperative you have. It's so important that you have these characteristics. Quite frankly, it's important you have these characteristics as a parent, period, biological or adopted. However, I'm going to go into specifically the adoption scenario and how this relates to adoption, right? First one, selflessness. You need to be a selfless person. Your overarching motto in terms of adoption should be, what is best for my child? Again, that should be everyone as a parent, what's best for my child. But in terms of adoption, that means that you may be uncomfortable having the biological family in your child's life or talking about the biological family. It may make you feel inadequate. It may make you feel defensive or threatened as the parent. I've seen, especially adopted mothers, get very threatened by biological mothers. That's not your real mom. I'm your real mom. No, you don't need to know. Why do you need to know about them? I loved you. I've raised you. Blood doesn't matter. It's love that matters. This defensiveness, it's very selfish. You're not thinking about the psychological need of that child to know where they come from. It's not personal. We don't do this. We don't feel this way to make you feel bad. It's just an inherent need that many of us have. And then the second reason, it's kind of two things put into one, but excellent communication skills as well as emotional intelligence. This is really important, especially if you're in the scenario 2, where you do have a decent interaction with the biological parents. Maybe once per year you have a phone call. Perhaps you are able to do what I was able to do and have the biological parents come and visit. Or if you guys really get along, they can go and visit the biological parents, which happened in my case over time. But that's very uncommon. You need to have great communication skills and paired with that emotional intelligence to recognize what sort of needs your child has and be able to communicate those needs to the other parent or with the child. It may be that your child comes home one day and they look sullen and sad, and you ask, what's wrong? And then the child may say something like, oh, we have to make a family tree today. And the immature adoptive parent might think to say, oh, well, we'll just do our family. All that matters is love. But a more emotionally intelligent parent would see that this is clearly upsetting their child and would sit down with them and have a conversation about why it's upsetting to them and how they feel about that and help them resolve those issues, if anything, recognize it and feel comfortable speaking with you about that. And that is so important. If you cannot do that, if you suck at communication, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work out. End up like me. Next one, pretty self-explanatory, emotionally and mentally stable. You gotta be. Have a special emotional fortitude to become an adoptive parent, because it's really easy to get offended. It's really easy to feel attacked as the adoptive parent or the biological parent, because there's just so many open wounds that can, salt can be poured into, especially if, let's say, you were infertile or you're same-sex couple, so maybe you're feeling a little insecure about your status as a parent, and then your child says something like, I wish I knew my real parents, or I want to go and live with my real parents. That's going to sting. You need to be able to be emotionally strong enough to realize that they're not trying to hurt you, they are hurting. You need to be able to recognize your triggers and then make sure that those do not carry on to your parenting. And when they do, because they will here and there, you will be able to address it and apologize and rectify it. The last one is probably the most important, is that you have great patience. You need to be so patient as an adoptive parent. Of course, you need to be patient as any kind of parent, but adoptive parent, it's some kind of special patience, very special patience. Adoptees, they often come, especially foster kids that have been adopted, or kids that are adopted when they're a little bit older and they may have a background that you're not familiar with, or maybe they have a really dark past. But even newborns, they can grow up to have these issues as well. It could be behavioral, social, intellectual, emotional issues that you need to be patient with. You're not going to be able to just like snap your fingers and have it all be solved. You're not going to be able to kiss it better. You're not going to be able to hug it better. You're not going to be able to talk it out. It's going to take a lot of time. So some issues include, when it comes to behavioral, they may lash out at you. They may say they hate you. They may try to run away. They may act out in school. They may hit. They may do all of these things. Usually the reason behind that is they're testing boundaries to see if you will abandon them the way that they felt that they were abandoned by their first parents. And then you've also got the emotional issues. Lots of adoptees deal with depression. They deal with self-harm. They deal with rage. They deal with, a lot of adoptees have what's called reactive attachment disorder, which is basically a very extreme attachment disorder. They really struggle to attach to people, especially parental figures. And that can be really frustrating as an adoptive parent, because all you want them to do is to love you as much as you love them. I personally have experience with that. I do not trust parental figures the way that I wish I could. Had my parents known about this a little bit more, perhaps when I was younger, I could have received treatment to reprogram my brain while it was still very malleable, so that I don't have problems attaching to adults and people now as an adult. It's something that I'm working on, but I'm probably never going to have that secure of an attachment as I could. And that's why it's really important that education happens before we adopt. There's also like learning issues. So in my case, with my ADHD, I had a really hard time learning to read, a really hard time with math, lots of writing, everything when I was younger. And that's going to take it's going to take patience to figure out why, and then to hopefully remedy that. That's pretty much it. Those are the main things that you need to think about. And it seems kind of strict, but I think it should be. I don't think it should be easy. Like these are children's lives that we're talking about. If you're not in it for the long haul and you're not in it to like work your ass off, then don't be an adoptive parent. This is a really important, really big thing. And I think that it takes special people to be a good adoptive parent, quite frankly. One thing I didn't mention that I want to is that I think that adoptees and foster kids and people who had adoptive siblings, or they're familiar with adoption in a very intimate way, make great adoptive parents as well, as long as they're emotionally healthy. So that's another thing that I think is a good trait. But anyways, I hope that you found this interesting. Make sure you comment down below if you want to know more, if you have some questions, if you want to learn about something else. Like if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it. I don't care. It helps me with the algorithm either way. Just don't be a dick. And I hope you guys have a great day.